All right, it is 10 a.m. and so we'll get started right away. Again, thank you everybody for joining us. It's an absolute honor to have these four folks that are on. You'll obviously recognize, for those in Austin, the superheroes and rock stars of many of your experience design within Austin with Nancy and Savile. So thank both of you for being on this. And then Bill and Kalene, thank you guys for joining us from afar as you share your experiences and observations of the tourism industry across the country with a potential sort of case study within the Bentonville experience with Kalene Griffith. Just as a heads up for those that have just joined, this is being recorded and we will be then editing this and posting this to the Impact Austin website for all of you to share across your networks after all this is said and done. The second thing is this is not the end of the conversation. This is the beginning of many conversations to prompt as Austin begins to look to the future of their planning. So really, this speaker series overview is being jump-started by Impact Austin. It's a virtual community learning resource as strategic planning gets underway to address future growth, housing, economic development, immigrant support, food access and equity, parks and open space, connectivity and transportation, education, arts and culture, brand and story, tourism, city infrastructure, public parks, and planning. Because this is systems work, right? This is how we're kind of approaching this. It isn't just about tourism. It's about how you tell your story and the awesomeness that Austin is becoming and has been for a long time. These online discussions invite and welcome a cross-section of attendees, right? And that's really important, that not only are you able to share who and what you are right now, but by editing these videos and pushing them out, hopefully this stimulates great conversation beyond just this video series. So thank you everybody for joining. And without further ado, we shall jump right into it. And Bill, we'll start with you and with everybody, because everybody on the call may not know everyone. Just a real quick introduction around the table. Bill, if you want to start, then we can talk Kalene, Nancy, and Savile, just kind of real quickly level set who you are and your connection. And then Bill, we can jump right into your beginning.
All right. Well, hey, thank you so much for the opportunity and greetings, everybody. My name is Bill Geist. I have a firm called DMOProz, a very small boutique consulting firm that works exclusively with destination marketing organizations around the country. We've worked with about 200 destinations nationwide. We don't say that to brag, just that we've seen virtually every organizational chart, structural concept, funding mechanism there is. And we love to be able to take that information and share it with communities like yours. So that's really who we are. Kalene?
I'm Kalene Griffith, and I am the CEO and president of Visit Bentonville. I've been here almost 18 years in this role. I've had the opportunity to work on all levels within our community in a lot of different ways because we were a pass-through destination and now became a leisure destination. And so I'm fortunate to be part of that. I'm also was appointed by the governor to be on the State Parks and Tourism Commission. I'm in my second term of that. So I'm very vested in tourism, not just in our community, which is my livelihood, but also in the state, because it makes all of us better within our organization as tourism if we're working together.
Hello, I'm Nancy. I'm super excited to be joining you all today. I am the Executive Director of Discover Austin. I've been in this position for about 10 years now. Prior to that, I was in hospitality with hotels. And so that was about 10 years as well. And I look forward to learning from everyone, and I will pass it along to Savile.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. I am Savile Lord. I oversee the SPAM Museum here in Austin, Minnesota. I also do some work on our community relations and archives for Hormel Foods, which is the company that owns the SPAM Museum. I have the absolute honor of celebrating 7 years here at the museum. We celebrated 7 years on April 22nd, so just last week, and am just really thankful that each and every one of you joined us today.
Let's launch into the conversation.
Okay. Well, I guess that means me. So thank you again for the opportunity. This is all, I think, the conversation really centers around storytelling and why that is so important. And it always pains me when I can't find a attribution. And I don't know who said this first, but I love this quote, that there is no place anything like this place anywhere near this place, so this must be the place. And that is true for every community. Every community in this nation, in this world, is unique. I mean, we all may have a Walmart supercenter, but the core of our downtowns, no one looks like we do. Very, very few. And so that's really where this comes from. And it really comes down to a sense of place, right? And there's a number of reasons or ways that a community can stand out from the crowd. It may be the culture of the place. So, you know, maybe it's a Norwegian base of population. It could be architecture, like this image from Galena, Illinois. There's just a certain look of architecture in Galena that brings out just the beauty of the place and makes it one of the coolest little boutique and culinary areas in the Midwest. For some of us, it's public spaces. So we were talking before we went live about all of the acres of parkland available in the Austin area. Maybe it's heritage, maybe it's landmarks, maybe it's traditions that we have, it's lifestyle, it's nature. There's a lot of different reasons that every community can kind of hang their hat on being a sense of place. And there's it. Now, I can give attribution here, and I always do. Maura Geist is one of the true thought leaders in our industry. And about 13, 14 years ago, she uncorked this, I call it the circle of life, at an event. And it caught hold. And I don't think there's probably a day goes by that Maura isn't quoted somewhere in this nation with this soliloquy, if you will. And that is, if you build a place where people want to visit, you're going to build a place where people want to live. You're going to build a place where people want to live. You got to build a place where people have to work. If you build a place where people want to work, that's where business wants to be. And if you're building a place where business wants to be, you're back to building a place that people want to visit to see what business has created. Everything starts with a visit. And that visit happens because of destination marketing and the storytelling that we do both at a DMO level and at a community-wide level. Because this is really way more, as was said earlier in this broadcast, it's way more than tourism, because we now realize that what we do in destination marketing also is about talent acquisition, about workforce development, about bringing people in to live in our place. And so the mandate for destination marketing is much bigger than maybe it was 20 years ago when we kind of coined this term heads in beds. That's what we were all about, is heads in beds. Well, it's way bigger than heads in beds, because tourism is truly the first date for economic development. As there's, one of the most interesting things right now in this space is that the mayor of Cleveland, Ohio, has placed talent acquisition into the Convention and Visitor Bureau's mandate. And we had an opportunity on our podcast to talk to the CEO of Destination Cleveland, and he said, he goes, chambers of commerce and economic development units are really, really good at B2B communication, business to business. He says, but workforce development isn't a B. Workforce development is a C. We're talking to individuals. We're talking to consumers, B2C communication. And who does that better than anyone? It's a destination marketing organization. One of the other Maura quotes that I love, and she has this in her email, in the what is that? The little where your name, address, what am I calling?
Signature line. Yeah.
Signature. Yeah. Cash in hand economic development delivered immediately by visitor spending. And that's really what it is we do. So why storytelling? So to kind of acquaint myself, because sadly I've never been to Austin, and now having done my research, I can't wait to come and visit. But when I went to Google and I pulled up the map, this is what I got. And it shows you that you've got a McDonald's, you've got a Walmart Supercenter, you've got a transfer station. Clearly the Spam Museum is there, but there's a Quick Trip. I mean, there's nothing outside of the Spam Museum and maybe the observation tower on this map that says, I got to go there. I got to come. So that means that if Google is serving this up, we have to be intentional about telling a better story. And maybe that story is the observation tower, not to take anything away from the Spam Museum, but there is no dark sky certified community in the state of Minnesota. Could you be that? And I think you could. And is that the next piece of the puzzle for Austin? Because what they have found, I think, over the past 20 years in Florida, on the coastal communities at least, is everybody says, hey, we got a great beach. Well, everybody's got a great beach. So it's in Florida, it's beach and. What is the and? You know, for Sarasota, it's beach and culture. You know, for St. Augustine, it's beach and heritage. So what is the and? And could it be the fact that you've got dark skies, and could be possibly the first dark sky certified community in the state of Minnesota? The other thing that Google serves up, this is the first picture they serve up. And I don't know whose house this is, and I don't mean to denigrate this individual, but I don't think this is the image that you want to represent Austin, Minnesota. And yet this is the first image that comes up when you Google Austin, Minnesota. So what's the story? Spam clearly is a big part of that story. But again, what's the next piece? And I love what Spam is doing because, I mean, let's be honest, there's kind of a stigma attached with Spam. And yet it is, you know, a highlight of Hawaiian cuisine. And across the world, it is a big part of people's world. And so how do you take what is in some quarters a joke and say, no, you don't seem to understand. This can be high cuisine. And then we take it a step further. And do you double down on Spam? I mean, I don't think a lot of people, me included, understood the breadth of the brands that are associated with Spam. Some huge names, some really unique names, and then the 199 Ventures, which is a whole philosophy of partnering with emerging food companies and entrepreneurs. And so there's a story there, especially in a world that is enamored with culinary, that maybe you double down on something like this. Or again, do you go a different direction? Now, I know he only lived there for a while, but John Madden is a god in some quarters. And do we take advantage of the fact that you have that pedigree of John Madden and can do something about that, either through the video games, through his culture of broadcast, through the culture of football? You know, what is that that could be something that adds to the Austin brand? There are some communities you walk into and you just know that you're in a place. Leavenworth, Washington, not Kansas. Leavenworth, Washington has gone to great extent to be very Bavarian, everything Bavarian. I mean, that is the look, that is the feel. And if you want to see how Bavarian they've gotten, there is a fabulous video that probably launched about 10 years ago to a lot of local in Leavenworth consternation, because it was so off-brand. It was a hip hop video with dancing girls in Bavarian clothing. It just was so off-brand. But because their brand is so solid, that was what made that video so incredible. So Leavenworth Gumsba, I think is probably the name of the video that'll get that to come up for you, and you'll chuckle too. And it brought Leavenworth to a whole new audience. Another community that has really adopted the Bavarian thing is Gaylord, Michigan. And Gaylord is an interesting situation because the town of Gaylord is on the east side of the interstate, and it had always been there before the interstate came. When the interstate kind of cut through the community, the west side turned into all of the chain stores, all of the superstores, and it is really a total yin and yang on either side of the interstate, which is a great thing because people who are vacationing there for any length of time, you know, can avail themselves of national brands. But where you really want to hang out is over here on the historic side. And Gaylord has really been dealing with an erosion over the past number of years of the Bavarian side. Buildings are being either converted or taken down or lost to fire. And the new builds are not adhering to the Bavarian theme. And so the destination marketing organization there has really taken a complete pivot away from Bavarian, and their slogan is all outdoors, because they are the golf capital of Michigan. They have great ski hills as well. And so they've really taken their message, their story is now less about Bavarian and more about the outdoors. Shipshewana is another one. Shipshewana has always been known as Amish country, and people have over decades come to experience Amish culture, to understand what it's all about, learn about the history. But the Amish side of Shipshewana, honestly, is less and less important to today's travelers. So a local entrepreneur decided that they need to be all about performance, and built this amazing concert hall where absolute A and B level performers are performing in Shipshewana. Shipshewana is now known probably more, and probably is coming around more to being an entertainment capital than they are the Amish. And frankly, they're about the same size as Austin. There's the whole concept of building a pop culture. My favorite, obviously, is Winslow, Arizona, from the song Take It Easy. I'm standing on a corner in Winslow, Arizona, and she comes around the corner, and what do I see? I see a girl in a flatbed Ford. And so you've got the obligatory statue standing on the corner, but also in the window in that corner is that flatbed Ford. So they've taken the fact that they were highlighted in a song at one time and really built upon the fact that that's what Winslow, Arizona is all about. Keeping with the music theme, and I have to admit, I'm a music guy, so I'm drawn to these places. But Rocky Mount, Virginia is a small town, maybe 5,000 people. And somebody had the idea that that old Harvester showroom could be turned into a music venue. And it's about a 600-seat venue. And they play probably 4 nights a week with, again, national talent. This is Sam Bush. If anybody's into bluegrass, he's one of the biggest names in bluegrass, and they really are about Americana and that kind of music, and they sell out almost every night. And they're really kind of in the middle of nowhere. I mean, they're probably 40 minutes away from Roanoke, out in the Blue Hills. It's one of those things that they have found that niche that brings people at 4 nights a week at least into Rocky Mount to hear music, and of course, obviously, to enjoy culinary and others. And then I'm from Madison, Wisconsin. Down the road from us is kind of a fascinating story, and that is Mount Horeb, Wisconsin. Mount Horeb, small town, once again, but about 40 years ago, I'm not sure what the tree that lined most of the city streets was, what brand of tree that was, but there was a blight, and they lost probably 60 or 70% of those trees. And somebody had the bright idea of, rather than taking the trees out at the roots, that they would cut them off at about 4 feet, and then they would carve trolls out of, because it's a very Norwegian town and trolls are a big part of Norwegian culture. And so up and down this main street of their small downtown are trolls carved out of these old dead trees everywhere. And they, of course, call it the troll way, haha. But it is, obviously what it causes people to say, well, why would you go to Mount Horeb? Well, because you're going to want to go see the trolls. And our last example for you is one of my favorites is Chickasha, Oklahoma. And again, this gets to doubling down. So for years, they have had one of the top 10 national Christmas displays in the country. And new management there in charge of their economic development and tourism division decided, well, if we're going to be known for having this amazing Christmas light display, how do we double down on that? And so what they've gone and done, and I don't have a picture for you, and I'm sorry, I should have tried to find one, but they went out and said, well, okay, you remember the movie A Christmas Story, and you're going to shoot your eye out, and that awful leg lamp? Well, they've gone out and commissioned the largest freestanding leg lamp in America, standing 40 feet tall, and that is currently in their town square. So not only is Chickasha Christmas village for December, but now there's a piece of Christmas 12 months out of the year. And again, doubling down on that story is, and when you talk to those people, they say it's not just about Christmas. It's about the fact that we don't take ourselves seriously. We have a lot of fun here, and we're good with that kind of a culture. And they're using that image to attract workforce to come out of Oklahoma City, and Chickasha is maybe 20 minutes out of the city, and say, wouldn't you rather live in Chickasha than live in
Oh, did we lose? Did we lose Bill?
I think
and
we did.
of doubling down on getting, what is it about you? And for you, clearly it starts with spam, but then where does it go from there? And I think that's the question, and that's the conversation.
Yeah. So Bill, there's two parts here that I think would be interested, and then switching over to Nancy and Savile to answer is, how does a community decide what to double down on? It can be very dangerous if it's the wrong thing, right? And to that point, to follow up, Nancy and Savile, what are some of those things that might be emerging out of the Austin story that you guys are saying, this is something that we might want to double down on or move to that? So first, Bill, how does a community decide? And then following up, Nancy and Savile, what are some things that you're hearing within the community that might be some of these doubling down themes?
I'm, not to dodge the question, but I think that it's a two-part answer. And that is that I think you can go to the community and you can ask, and you can do some deep dives into, what do we want to be known for? What do we take pride in? Where is the opportunity to find something new that maybe people don't anticipate or expect from us? And so there is that community thing. The other side of the coin really comes down to, and I'll stick with Chickasha, and I'll stop sharing so that Kalene can jump in. But that was really one guy. That was a guy who took over the economic development office and was looking for something to get national, and he got international attention, because when they erected that leg lamp, there were stories in Japan, in Europe, all over the world about this little place called Chickasha. His whole point was, I got to do something that's going to draw national and international attention. And he decided to double down on Christmas because they already had that. And it was an easier move for him to go leg lamp than to say, I'm going to build, I don't know, the National Tornado Museum, because there wasn't a connection yet. So,
right. And so Nancy and Savile, what are some things that you're hearing on what are you known for right now? And what are maybe some emerging themes that you think might be able to double down on within Austin?
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sure we're probably going to say the same thing, but I think one of the emerging themes for Austin right now is our whitewater park. We've just finished the feasibility study, or getting the money for the feasibility study, to see what it would be like to turn Austin into a whitewater, to have a whitewater theme where people could utilize the nature that is around us. That is what George Hormel, the founder of Hormel Foods, loved about this community, was how much agriculture there was and how much nature there was surrounding us. And that is why he decided to stay here. And that we haven't been utilizing that whitewater, so, or the water that is comes through our community. So how do we change that to really focus on bringing in that economic development? Nancy?
Absolutely. I totally agree with you on that. Could be the upcoming story. I'm going to backtrack a little bit on, we are known as Spamtown USA already. And so one thing that we did double down on a couple of years ago is we took a VW Beetle and we wrapped it to look like a pig. It was Petunia, our pink promoting pig, and we traveled all over the Midwest with her. She was regionally known. People took pictures with her. Events that were happening requested her to be in presence and that sort of thing. And so, you know, it wasn't just spam, it was Petunia the pink pig as well, kind of promoting the spam. But I think that was an example of something that we did double down on, and people started to recognize Austin as more of Spamtown USA through Petunia.
And one of the other things that you guys brought up through this process of interviews is you talked about this idea of unreasonable hospitality in Minnesota Nice as that sort of internal theming, right? Minnesota is known as that sort of Minnesota Nice. How are you seeing that potentially manifest as it relates to Bill's conversation about that brand and that theme of a community? What are some ideas that you have around that unreasonable hospitality in Minnesota Nice?
I had an experience just 2 weeks ago, just 2 weeks ago, with a couple that had driven to Austin. They're driving across the United States. It started in their hometown of Tennessee. And they had shown up at just a little bit after 9. Now, we have switched to our summer hours as of May 1st, but at that point in time, our opening hour was 10 a.m. And by luck or by crook, I was just leaving the museum, heading out for a day trip that I was taking, and came across these people. And I said, wait, here you are in front of the museum. Let me first take your photo. Because you have the man taking the picture of the woman, and then the woman taking the picture of the man. You're like, that doesn't sit well. You need to have a group photo. So I invited them to take this photo. And then I said, you know what? I have 10 minutes. Let me bring you inside. Let me show you the museum. We don't have a ton of time, but let me show you what I can. So we went inside and they just died. I mean, they literally had died and gone to heaven. They were huge Spam fans. They had no idea that this was going to happen. They were not expecting the museum to be open. They knew it was closed, but they still wanted their photo. To be able to get in, they then posted about it. I mean, it was shared quite a few times. I mean, just really had a good return on investment for one Facebook post. And the conversations that were started, just going out of my way in that one experience really helped to bring the name of the Spam Museum and the name of Austin, Minnesota to this bigger audience. And I think that's what we're constantly trying to do. Just really going above and beyond ourselves.
Absolutely. And I totally agree with that. I think there is an underlying tone of just over and above hospitality in the Austin community. I can share another example. We are working with a tourism TV show that's planning on doing an entire episode about Austin. And so I asked, what typically happens when you do these episodes? And they said, they do their research highlights and then they come to the community and do their own exploration so that they know what they want to put in their own episode. And we had offered them, would you want to meet the people that are kind of the heartbeat behind these operations, these attractions, these restaurants? And they said, absolutely. They were totally blown away by the fact that people would take time out of their day to meet with this production crew. And so we arranged everything. They came to town, they met the owners, the operators, they created that story about the people and the places, and their experience was phenomenal. And so the episode, their tourism episode for their TV production is a lot more in depth than it typically would have been, and it had a great connection with the viewers. And so they kind of highlighted that Minnesota Nice for us. And I think that could be a story that we continue to create.
Mm-hmm. So Kalene, do you want to jump onto your slides and start your sharing? It's a good segue from Nancy to this conversation of the brand and the conversation and how the organizational structure around this functions. And Nancy, we've talked a lot about Discover Austin and the organizational structure and how do you move forward, which we'll touch base later on in the video. So Kalene, if you want to jump on that and talk about your role within the Bentonville CVB.
Sounds great. Thanks, Daniel. I appreciate you guys having me. It's an honor to be able to come and visit and tell our story in Bentonville. And we're very proud of our community. And we have, I guess, Bentonville Nice or Arkansas Nice. We have this Southern hospitality that we're very proud of. And I think that has elevated us as a community. And we're very fortunate for that. But I'm gonna go back to that in just a second, but I want to kind of, just a second there. Oh, it's not going. You're seeing the whole screen, aren't you? There we go. Our brand, sorry, I didn't have that there. I wanted to talk a little bit about branding as a community. And one of the things we brand, promote, and sell Bentonville as a tourism destination, and that used to be our only mission statement. And as we progressed in the last 17 years, we are enhancing the quality of life. We're investing back into our community that we're able to tell that impacts our tourism, but also impacts our locals, where we help with our parks and facilities. If there's some investments that we can do that help elevate our tourism industry, but also impact our locals. So it's very important to us. We feel like our storytelling of stimulate economic development through the growth that we're having in our community. We tell our story, like Mara asked. I always tell people they have to visit our community before they invest, and they visit our community before they move here. So we are the front door or the gateway to economic development. And I think that we do that on a regular basis within our storytelling opportunities. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But if you guys can even envision that when I moved here 17 years ago, almost 18 years, we had 21,000 people. We are now at 56,000 people. 33 people a day are moving into the region, and our median age is 32 years old. If that kind of gives you kind of what our storytelling opportunities are from that perspective. I like to talk a little bit about this. I'm only going to target on one as I go through this presentation, but we have a roadmap, and you guys have a lot of different things going on in your organization within your community, from the spam to the outdoors to the dark skies there, in a sense. Music, cycling, arts, culinary, aviation, sports, meetings, all those things are part of our storytelling. Our big ones right now are, because of following COVID, outdoors has elevated in our tourism market in such a drastic format that people are looking for that outdoor experience. We bid onto that, and we bid hard when we chose cycling as one of our biggest avenues. We've invested in cycling in our community, our whole community. We have a new our cycling culture is big, but we did that with a group of people and a knowledge that we did it together. One of the things that I'm adamant about is we are a partner. And Nancy, we've talked a little bit about this, but we are partners with our corporate world, everything that's going on, just like you probably are with Hormel and spam. Federal, we're working with the federal government on things. We work with the state government on things. We're working with our city government, because we're not part of the city. We're autonomous of the city, but we work with our government. We are a big partner with our chamber as they're working on recruitment. We're brought into certain meetings. We ask them to meet with people when we bring them in as visitors. We did an event with paddle sports recently, and we had them in town. What we did was we brought our chamber and our economic development in, because there were like numerous businesses that came in for this conference to talk about what they could maybe do to open up their businesses in our community. But we hosted them and we made sure they were taken care of. So they got that Arkansas nice, or that Bentonville hospitality, Southern hospitality in that sense. And then we work also with our local foundations in our community, and that's a huge bonus for us in our community. So Nancy, I know that you guys have some partnerships that you guys work with within your community. And I'm going to talk a little bit about where I'm going to take it one step further, but is there people that you guys are doing partnerships with that we can, even something that you can kind of highlight in your community that you're doing right now?
Absolutely. We have a lot of great partners with similar ones like you do, our city, our county, our chamber. When we have visitors coming in, whether they're coming in as leisure or bus groups, we partner with all of our vendors to make that experience just above and beyond what they expect. As far as our chamber and city and county, they're on our board as liaisons, we're on their board as liaisons. So keeping that open communication is key for us.
Yeah, that's great, Nancy. That's the one thing that I think has elevated us. And Savile, I know that we do a really cool partnership with Crystal Bridges and Amazium, where we do some co-op marketing. Do you guys have some of that within your tourism bureau with Nancy on that?
Actually, Nancy has created a Hormel Foods tour that goes with the Hormel Institute. It goes with the Spam Museum up to the Nature Center, and then also with one of the houses, not only the Hormel Historic Home, which is one museum, but then also the house that Jay Hormel had lived in himself, Gerard. So she's created that on her own, and it's had a wonderful feedback here in the community. But we are in one block here in downtown Austin, part of 4 museums. There are 4 museums, mini museums, some of them, but 4 museums within a 3-block radius. And so we do try to promote that as well, because it's fabulous if you want 3 of the 4 are free. And so you can just hit each one of them and, have a great experience in a town you didn't think had, just had the Spam Museum, but you learn it has quite a bit more.
I think that's one of the things that I think is the benefit of tourism, is we have the opportunity to tell our story in the way that we want it to be told. And I think when you have multiple museums, because people think that they're coming for one museum and get an opportunity to do more than what you anticipated. One of the things I think I'm most proud of in our community, and Daniel was part of this in the very beginning of it. When I started in 2005, our chamber president and our downtown association was meeting, and they were just having coffee. And then when I started, they asked if I would come, and then we added different folks to our Monday morning meeting. For 17 years, almost 18, we have met every single Monday morning. It used to be at 10. It's recently been moved to 11. And I just wanted to kind of show you the groups that meeting with this. And it's 1 hour long, no more than 1 hour. We make it 1 hour. If you make it, that's great. So a lot of times we have 13 to 15 people there. Sometimes we have 5 if it's a different kind of weekend that stuff is going on for that. But it includes our tourism bureau, our chamber, our school, our city, our mayor, our downtown association, our county judge, which is like a city manager, but our county manager, our Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art, Amazium, which is our children's museum, Runway Group, which is a local investment company, Walton Family Foundation, Walmart representative, and more recently, we did add our Northwest Arkansas National Airport. We just changed our name from regional to national. So we're very excited about that. But that was one of our largest, I feel like that is what makes our community more cohesive in our storytelling and the direction we're going in as a community. So if something's going on in our community, we're able to work together to tell that story as a unified voice, no matter what goes on. And we've also stopped that meeting on a Monday morning and said, listen, we have this challenge. This is going to be our focus. We don't do a roundtable of what's going on kind of thing. It is really interesting. It is so important that we tell our story. If we launch something new, everybody's on that same page. They can pass it on to their team as they see fit. They can make sure that somebody's involved in it if they're not the person. We've worked on projects where I'll announce that we're working with 2 or 3 different companies, and somebody go, well, we're working with them on this. And I'm like, all right, let's bring everybody together. Rather than this person's meeting with 3 different people, they could have one meeting. It's a much more cohesive storytelling opportunity, but it also just elevates our efficiency as a city. And that is, I think, one of the things that I think has put us in the forefront as Bentonville, as we continue to tell our story and create this brand opportunity. I'm going to kind of showcase cycling as our identifier and it's really a big deal for me when we talk about storytelling and branding, because it is one of the things that we were not a cycling destination before 2015. We had 5 miles of trails, and Nancy, we were talking about that parkland of 1,000 acres. Man, if I could have 1,000 acres of parkland, I would be in heaven for sure, because we have a lot of urban experiences within our community, which we love. There's this connectivity, and that's what's been really important for us. But we went and presented at the National Bicycle Tourism Conference in 2015 about our trail system, because we had 5 miles. And if you have over 10 miles, you become a tourism destination. People will drive for over 10 miles. So all of a sudden, I bid on hosting the IMBA World Summit. And they told me that about 250 people come to this IMBA World Summit annually. We had 600 people come. And in panic mode, because we don't have a convention center. I have a space that holds about 400. So we did some really cool unconventional convention ideas and hosted things in the downtown and our old buildings in our downtown, and had breakout sessions. So people really got to create this downtown experience within our community. They didn't go to a convention center. They got to be within our community. And you can see that when we hosted 14 different publications during that event. They told our story for almost 2 years. My investment into that was very small, but my investment in those publications had for 14 people to come in and tell one story thinking I was going to get 14. I probably got, I think, 36 stories within that next 2 years about our cycling city that we hadn't even really identified ourselves as a cycling city, but we knew that that was the direction our vision was going. We launched our Oz Trails brand, and I'm going to show you that. We had Bike Magazine in 2017, Bike Magazine, Bike Testing, or Bicycling Magazine. You can see, Wall Street Journal, Outside Magazine, all these people started seeing us as a destination. So we started telling our story. In 2019, we hosted 32 different cycling events, but we invested dollars in to host those. You have to imagine, and if you look at when I first started, our budget was about a little over 500,000. So I had a very little budget to be able to invest in those. But you know what we did was we negotiated and talked to them, and then we got local folks that were cycling enthusiasts to help offset some of our expenses. So it wasn't always dollars coming from us as a bid fee or a hosting fee. We partnered with our city to say, oh, you're interested in cycling. Can you come up with $3,000 or $4,000? And then all of a sudden we had $10,000 to $15,000, which was the bid fee to bring that event to our community. It changed our dynamics drastically from 2016 to 2019. And then you can see that we just continue to do it. 2022, we're building back up after COVID. We had 23 events. This year, we're up to almost 40 events in 2023. And you're going to see that we're hosting numerous cycling influencers. This week alone, we have 4, and one of them is from Germany. One of them is from we have a few coming in this next week from Belgium, and then we have another one coming in from a couple different communities. I want to say Boston, and I don't know where the 4th one is, but we have a lot of them, and they're all coming in within these next 3 weeks, and we're going to have more as we continue to go. So we're seeing that our storytelling is, when you pay for those influencers to come into your community to tell your story, it's a small fee. You might have to pay for their flight. You might not. They might drive in. You might have to pay for their hotel and their food, but their storytelling is an authentic story. It's not coming from Nancy and I. And I know, Nancy, do you guys host influencers and publications?
Yep. We usually try to do 2 or 3 of them every year.
Good, because that has been, I think, one of the most successful opportunities that we capitalized on. I upped my budget on that. And I also worked with some of our museums and different things to get them to help support that. And then we partnered with our restaurants and our hotels because they get to benefit from it also. So there was ways to do it at a very economical price. And here's our Oz Trails brand, Northwest Arkansas. And then in 2020, when we were in the midst of COVID and everybody wanted to do everything outdoors, we claimed and staked in the ground, we're the mountain bike capital of the world. And it was one of our biggest storytelling opportunities. And we still feel that we're the mountain bike capital of the world. We might not have the most trails, but our cycling community and our businesses have adopted cycling as a part of their storytelling. So our hotels are buying lockers for their hotels. They're outdoor lockers where they can go do that. They have just recently reached out to me to buy, I call them bike tools, where they're outside, where they have the air pump and all the tools and everything. We're going to be purchasing those in partnership with our hotels, so every hotel has it. We are, our restaurants are all asking for bike racks. Our museums want people to come in their bike clothes. We make everyone, our retailers are saying cyclists welcome on their doors. It is about our community really adopting it, and it's becoming more of that experience that you have on a bike, rather than you park your car and you're on the bike the whole time you're in Bentonville. And then we have that outdoor aspect of it. But I think what makes Bentonville unique is the connectivity. And Daniel and I talked a little bit about that, is that connectivity of the whitewater that you guys are working on, that we have whitewater experience, kayak park getting ready to open up in Siloam Springs. It's down the road from us, but we're figuring out ways to connect on our greenway, which is our paved trail all the way up and down Northwest Arkansas. How do we create that connectivity? Our single track trails are connected to our greenway. So you could be riding on the greenway, get on a single track trail, be in the mountains, come back out, you're back on the greenway. And it's all within, just down the road from a house and a neighborhood. So the urbanism of our trails has really made our experience unique to a lot of communities. And I know, Nancy, I know you and I've talked a little bit earlier on about how much data we use to make our decision making. And one of the things I like to talk about is we're really driven. Our storytelling is data driven for us. Sorry, I've got a cold if you can't tell. So my medicine got to me there. But we use data to make every decision we do. And I'm going to move this here real quick. Sorry. We use data every day, we monitor it, we evaluate it, we take our point of interest, and we have influencers for that. So we make sure of all of that every single time we're making a decision, from marketing to even recruitment of people coming into our community, to events. We'll look at the data. Where are those people coming from? If they're doing an event in California and they want to do here, if everybody's coming from the East Coast, that's probably not an event that we're going to bring to our area. So we look at the data every single time we are looking at it. And I'm going to show you, here's some data that we pulled up from our voyage, and you can look at it. If for us, it's voyage, and it's if they're over 4 hours, they have to be in our community more than 4 hours, and they have to be 50 miles or more out. So you can kind of look at how many that are over in our community 4 hours or more, and they're 50 miles or out. 84% of them are overnight that are going to Kohler Park. That's a huge number. We know that's tourism. You can see the distance they've traveled. And if you look at this, most of our distance, if you look at the 500 miles and 3 to 500, that's almost over half of our visitors are over 300 miles coming into the area. Look at our length of stay. You can see that if they're coming 50 to 100 miles, they're here for 1.4. If they're coming to 100 to 100 to 200, we're 2.1. If they're over 500 miles, they're coming for 4 nights. Man, we should be targeting over those 4 hours, that distance that they're coming 500 miles or more. Do we target some of those? We don't want to lose sight of our touch states, because we do a lot of marketing to our touch states. But over that 500 miles, we're looking and evaluating. And if you look at the top origin metros, our most recent Fort Smith is, that's a lot of our people 50 miles are out. They're probably riding our trails. They can ride over for a half day and enjoy themselves. And then you got Joplin, which is 45, Kansas City, 3 hours, Springfield, 2 hours, Little Rock, 3 hours, Tulsa, 2 hours, Dallas, 6 hours, Oklahoma City, 4 hours, Houston, 9 hours, and Topeka's 4 hours. So we can look at this and go, oh, who should we be targeting our audience when we're talking about cycling? We know this audience is coming, but we also have some data that tells us what major metropolitan cities that are using it. So I'm taking this data, I hand it to our communications and tell me, give me a plan. How are we going to target these audience? But we also look at who our emerging audiences are. So this is really key to some of our storytelling when we're doing our data from that perspective. Nancy, do you guys, and Savile, do you guys use data as you guys are making decisions, or who are you using for your data?
Savile, you want me to jump in on that one first?
Yeah, and then I'll follow up after that.
Perfect. So we actually get some data from Explore Minnesota Tourism. They do a lot of research and surveys and that sort of thing. So we use that, the STAR report, and then the SPAM Museum does an incredible job with gathering data from everybody who walks in the door. So we know how far they've come from and that sort of thing. Sav, I'll let you talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, and we do on a daily basis track not only where they're coming from, but also how they've learned about the museum, because that's really key in terms of finding out how people found out about Austin. Was it through Google? Was it through our billboards? Was it through an ad we did? So that has been really nice in terms of saying, okay, if you're having 50 people coming from such a town in Illinois, well, let's do a little more marketing in that town or along that route, because apparently that's working. So we do utilize that, but we can continue to figure out what to look at those numbers and to figure out where we can get other numbers that can help us grow.
Yeah, and I think that's important. We work with Crystal Bridges. I'm sure, Nancy, you take Savile stuff and utilize it. we look at their numbers of where people are coming from, and who's coming here the longest, who's coming here the most. And then we also, more recently, we have done how much they're spending. I didn't put that on there, but we're also looking at how much they're spending in our community. So then we're also, who should we be targeting from that perspective? So I think those are all things. And I love when I hear other CVBs that are targeting that stuff and really taking their data to tell their story. And Savile, I think you guys are looking at it to direct you where to market more or where to market less. And I think those are key parts of our storytelling. It wouldn't be pertinent of me if I did not end every presentation I have with Sam Walton, a quote from Sam Walton. And I think this one, talking to Nancy and Savile beforehand and talking about how our communities, I think, are very similar in the ways that we do things, is that we really do love and breathe and live our community on a regular basis. And I think Nancy, I can feel it when Nancy and I were talking on the first call that she's very similar to me. I live and breathe it. And I think this is probably my favorite quote from Sam. If you love your work, you'll be out there every day trying to do it the best you possibly can. And pretty soon everybody around will catch the passion from you like a fever. And I think that's one of the things that if I've learned anything from our collaboration and our partnership, people want to be on our bus. They want to be going on the bus and going in the right direction. And I think what has made our community so unique is the innovation and the marketing and the opportunity and the progress. And there's no idea that's a bad idea. We bring it together and then we kind of look at that idea and which direction do we go in. We may change that idea or that concept, but it's really a group effort making that happen. And if you're not all at the same table, it becomes an octopus with skates on it. And I think that's the kind of stuff that you don't want. I think if you're working together and going in the right direction, it can only, it's really a lot of fun is what I can say. I enjoy every day. I go to work. I say that it's overwhelming goodness because there's a lot going on, but I would not trade it for a minute. I hope that there's, opportunities for you guys. It sounds like you guys are doing so many wonderful things with the outdoors, with the SPAM museum. And I think you guys have so much potential.
We did even try to get a Madden Museum in Austin, but we haven't gotten the rights from John's family yet. But we tried that about 2 years ago because we thought, well, he was here for like 6 weeks, but it doesn't matter. It's still where he was born.
Yeah. Well, and also, yeah, for sure. I think sports is always a draw. Anytime you can get sports, you can't miss on a sports opportunity.
No, you can't.
So that's
you
great.
Really can't.
No.
So guys, we've got about 8 to 10 minutes left. And I know one of the big pieces is all of these initiatives and all these things that are going on. Obviously, you need the people and the passion behind it, but you also need the resources behind it. And Nancy, we had talked about, how your organization is structured and where it gets its resources. Kalene, obviously being one of your advertising and promotions commissioners, I know where your resources come from. But I think, but having an opportunity really quickly, Nancy and Savile, to talk about where your resources are coming from so the folks recognize how you're funded, how that works, how you're spending that, and what are some of the challenges around that funding mechanism when you start to think about what you could be doing with more resources in the sense of promoting Austin even further. So do you want to just talk real quickly about sort of your organizational structure within Discover Austin and how you're funded and maybe some of those potentials to grow over the next several years?
Absolutely. So Discover Austin, obviously nonprofit 501c6. We are primarily funded through lodging tax. And so our wonderful hotels within the city of Austin, when people stay there, then some of that funding comes back to Discover Austin to help promote more people coming into town. We do apply for grants through Explore Minnesota Tourism, and so we are fortunate to be able to receive some of those, and that's where the majority of our funding comes from. However, we have gotten really creative with creating partnerships, whether It is through our local organizations, whether it's through the county. If there's something that is kind of in their wheelhouse, we try to partner with them to stretch that dollar even further. And so, you know, back to the Minnesota Nice, we are nice to everyone within our state as well. And so we really value those partnerships that we have, because unfortunately there's never enough money. And so we try to do the best that we can with what we have. And so we know that when those visitors come into our community or into our area, they create that economic impact for everyone. So we rise together and we fall together. So building those partnerships is precious to us.
And from an organizational structure, you have like an advertising and promotions commission or a board that you work with, correct? That's appointed to that board, correct?
So we have 11 board members. 6 of them are at large and 5 of them are liaisons from the city, from the county, from the chamber. And then we also have one from Park and Rec as well.
Okay. All right. That's great. And Savile, your organization, you said earlier, is really sort of an extension of Hormel as a company. Is that correct?
That is 100% true. Although we are named the Spam Museum, we do represent the entire Hormel Foods Company.
Okay. All right. And from that funding mechanism, I mean, do you charge for the museum to enter?
We are blessed in that we do not have to charge an admission to the museum. We continue to be 100% free. And that's what makes it an interesting story to compare us to Bentonville and to be able to hear what Bentonville is doing, because Bentonville is very similar to our company, where that is the main employer. Hormel Foods is the main employer here in Austin. So we have so many similarities. So it's really great to be able to hear what they've been doing and what's worked.
Mm-hmm. That's great. That's great. So as we think about coming to the conclusion of this particular session, Nancy and Savile, as you begin to look at the next several years and the things that you're wanting to do, what are some challenges to some of those ideas? What are some of those ideas that you're hearing? And what are some ways that the community might be able to get involved to support what you're trying to accomplish as an organization?
Well, I think one of the things we are going to continue to do is tell our story. You know, we have a great past. We are really positive in the present, and we've got a great future outlook. And so just beginning to tell that story, I think, you know, sometimes our Minnesota Nice, we don't exactly aren't our best cheerleaders, but I think the community can be that front line for us. Let's tell everybody how amazing Austin is, whether it's the history, whether it's the outdoors, whether it's the food, the museums. There's so much that we have to be proud here. And I think sometimes just word of mouth is fantastic. We know our resources are limited. And so if the community can help us tell the story, and then if there's something that, you know, is kind of in their wheelhouse that we can partner with and make everything better, I think that would be a great plan going forward.
That's great. Savile?
I will say it, and I know we haven't had this conversation yet, but I truly think we need to increase our lodging tax. Or have some other tax incentive that will bring more money into our community. So one or the other, so that there is money for us to spend, because we really do. I mean, Nancy does an amazing job of utilizing every penny of our budget, but it doesn't allow us to think big. We have some great ideas. Even things as simple as putting in decorative art that connects the sidewalks together, or that is the crosswalks, things like that. They cost money. How do we fund things like that? Those good ideas that'll bring more personality to our community. We need that money. We need those tax incentives, and no matter which way we can. I would implore everybody who lives in or around Austin to start thinking creatively about how we could do it in a way that was fair and just, but that could truly support our community.
That's great. So this challenge of thinking big, what we heard, thinking big, and how do you think big? How do you fund the thinking big? How do you build teams around that thinking big that support that big thinking? Kalene and Bill, we've got just a couple minutes left. What is one or two sentences that you can kind of add to that whole idea of thinking big from a funding mechanism? I mean, Kalene, you run an organization, you've got a lot of people behind that. You have to answer to a lot of different individuals and restaurants and hotels. And then Bill, maybe one or two sentences about maybe a point of order or cheerleading as they move forward on thinking big. So Kalene, why don't you jump on that first?
Sure. I'm going to use, my staff loves it when I say this, but our philosophy is to solve for yes. How we do that is we go a lot of different ways, but we work really well together and we brainstorm and we solve for yes. And, you know, in the government world, it is not always that conversation. So it is important that our team looks at innovation and opportunities as yes, and then figures out how to make it work.
And I'll take the other side of the coin. And for me, it's where is the pain point? Where is the pain point in the community? And I'm going to share with you the Tulsa story. And I know Tulsa is way bigger than Austin, but just think about it. This is scalable. Tulsa had a problem 10 years ago, and that was people didn't understand how amazingly sophisticated and arts-centric that town is. And most people just think there's tumbleweed going down the street. The business community, the corporate community, not hospitality, business community, said, we've got a problem. We can't attract top talent. And so what they did was they went out, and in the beginning, it was 50 companies. Today it's 100, that these companies wrote checks to build a image campaign for the community to change Tulsa's image. And that fund got up to $2.4 million last year from 100 companies. Okay, they're bigger than you. What about 10%? If you could do 10%, imagine what another $250,000 could mean to your budget. And it's a pain point. It's where is the pain, and can the corporate community step forward and say, yeah, we got a problem bringing in top talent to Austin. We know that the CVB is the best B2C communicator there is. And that's one of the, I think it's one of the best destination stories we've got out there from a funding perspective.
So guys, thinking big, which is definitely something that Austin has in spades, which is absolutely fantastic being in these conversations. What is the 2.0 of Austin going forward? What is your story as you begin to continue to do all the grassroots work and everything else is sort of the thing that I'm hearing through this, Nancy and Savile. I mean, is that sort of a good provocation to go forth and prosper as you guys continue to have conversations in the street? How do you keep thinking big? How do you bring people along with you? How do you find the funding mechanisms to do that big thinking? At the same time, how are you celebrating the daily awesomeness that goes on in your restaurants and your hotels and your parks and your trails and all the work that's going on there? Is that a fair statement to end this conversation with? That provocation is, how do we continue to move forward on these big picture ideas?
Absolutely. We have a lot of story yet to tell, so let's make that happen.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, as we mentioned, coming to a close, respecting everybody's time, it's 11:02. We will be recording this and putting this up on the Impact Austin website for folks that weren't able to make it on this call to be able to listen to the great storytelling as we stick with that storytelling theme between Bill, Kalene, Savile, and Nancy. Thank you guys so much for being a part of this. What a wonderful conversation we had today. And hopefully this conversation continues well after this, because Savile and Nancy, you and your teams continue to do the hard work and the heavy lift. So thank you for doing what you do. It matters not just to Austin, but for communities across America, and hopefully other communities will be able to learn from you, right, as you go through this process. And that's the great conversation of mentorship. Now you have relationships with Bill and Kalene, and this is for everybody in Austin. Please follow up with them if you have additional questions. Please continue this dialogue, and thank you, everybody, and have an awesome day.
Thank you.
Bye.